Hello and welcome to the Pondering Papaya podcast, a new show about everything McLaren in F1. Now, when we set a launch date for this podcast, we perhaps weren't expecting such a busy week in the F1 world. From Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari to Andretti getting rejected for F1 itself, there is plenty to talk about in this week's episode. But of course, this is a McLaren podcast. This is what we're here to talk about. So while we will touch on those subjects, first we're going to discuss everything you need to know about McLaren this week. Joining me on today's podcast is Dan Moxon from The Mirror, Abby Bathurst from Formula Nerds, and YouTuber LawVS. As usual, you can find all their links down below, but for now, let's get into it. So as promised, I'm back here with my guests, and let's kick things off. As you can imagine, I'm going to let you behind the curtain a little bit. When I was writing the script for this, or the notes we're going to talk about, it was before all the Hamilton news, all the Andretti news, pretty much everything in the world of F1. So we are going to talk about that a little bit later, but for now, we're going to focus on McLaren because this, after all, is a McLaren podcast. So Dan, I'm going to come to you first. I'm going to give you the honour of being the first question. Before all the Hamilton news, obviously the big talking point was Lando's new deal. Like, what did you make of it? Do you think it's a good deal? Do you think he's going to be there for a long time? Basically, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's massive, isn't it? It's massive for McLaren, and I know you just said there that we're not going to talk about the Hamilton thing, but to bring it immediately onto that, I think that has just made it seem even more important, because I noticed Toto Wolff did a press conference the day after all of the Hamilton mess, and one of the things he said stuck out to me was a few contracts have been signed a few weeks ago that we would have looked at that would have been interesting. I mean, that's clearly Lando and Charles Leclerc that he's referring to there, and you know, they clearly would be looking at those sort of guys. So it's even more important, I think, in the context of the Hamilton decision, because Mercedes would surely come knocking for Lando, but yeah, the new contracts made that a whole lot harder.
Yeah, and of course, before it was Mercedes, a lot of the talk was about Red Bull, obviously. Like, Abby, coming to you, do you think this is the end of Red Bull's interest, or do you think they're going to think, okay, we'll get him someday, it might not be next year, it might be the year after, but do you think they still sort of have him as one of their targets, maybe?
I think the door will always be open, probably more when Max retires. When Max leaves the sport, I think Red Bull will then focus more towards Lando. But at the moment, I can see him staying with McLaren for a few more years to come, especially given their turnaround last season. I never expected McLaren to be able to go from having a DNF with Oscar in the first race and P17 with Lando in the first race to then scoring several podiums, becoming the second best team effectively on the grid. So at the moment, McLaren, Lando, it is a great partnership, but I think the door is still open for Lando to go to Red Bull when Max is out of the sport.
And you mentioned that, obviously, that huge comeback. Do you think that was pretty much pivotal to him signing on? Do you think if we had a year where McLaren weren't as competitive, do you think he would have been like, okay, I've got to go, I'm getting a bit older, like, I've got to go. But do you think that year last year was so important for him extending?
I think so, because yes, he has been with McLaren throughout his junior career, and he is a big part of that family. The team are kind of built around him, and then you have Oscar coming in, and we've all seen Oscar's talents in Formula 2, Formula 3. We all know what kind of driver he is. And at first I thought he would crack under the pressure, but he didn't. And then for McLaren to make those comebacks, to have the new personnel coming into the team this year, the new wind tunnel, all the infrastructure they're building, I think it's cemented Lando to go, okay, McLaren have something here. We can improve. I can stay with them. If they hadn't, I think he definitely would have looked elsewhere, because as people have said in F1, he is a future world champion, and I do believe that he is. He's one of the youngest on the grid, with the likes of Leclerc and Russell and Albon. That group of drivers, they all have something they can bring to the sport. So for Lando, I think he would have looked elsewhere, but I'm glad he didn't. As a McLaren fan, I'm glad he did stay with McLaren.
And Laura, if I come to you, like, what do you make about what he can achieve in this contract? It's vaguely termed multi-year. They haven't given an end date. I think it's probably 3 or 4 years, whatever we guess. Do you think, I mean, starting with the obvious, is he going to win this year? Is that what he can expect? Is he going to aim for that? Or does he want world championships? Do you think, is that possible the next few years?
I feel like on an operational level, McLaren have got the most put together posse, as it were. As we've seen, I mean, the Lewis Hamilton thing is completely blown apart Mercedes and Ferrari, and you just think, well, Ferrari, they've they've got a few more years maybe a couple more years to get back, operationally speaking, fighting fit. Mercedes looked like they were on an even steady keel. Like the W15, it was quite encouraging. Then Lewis just goes with a sledgehammer. Don't like any of that. So, right, I'm off. And then they're completely left high and dry. And now McLaren, though, they've got everything together. You wouldn't have been saying that 12 months ago, indeed, as we were talking about. But now they've got the car, they've got the drivers locked down with this brand new contract, and Lando's now gone, all right, I'm off the market now. That's good, because Zach Brown has basically told everyone, all right, back off, he's mine. And now McLaren could just forget about the drivers being tempted away. I mean, contracts can be broken, but right now, they've got that car. They feel quite confident. The whatever it takes campaign is clearly, that's punchy. I've not seen McLaren this punchy in a long time. Like, even 2019, when they started to get back together with Andreas Seidel, they were like, okay, we're going to take this very easy, very steady. We're going to just see how things go. We're not going to get ahead of ourselves. 2020 got a little bit feisty with McLaren's podium, the first one for Lando. But I think this deal, it's a sign of assurance that Lando, they're building the car around him. And they want him there. And it's an assurance that, yeah, sure, Oscar's been fantastic. That don't worry about this kid. He's got your back. And Lando's got like, okay, this team is definitely behind me, and McLaren can win. I feel like they've really got everything together, because I feel like at Interlagos, that car, the McLaren, was the fastest, but the combination of Max and the RB19, still the fastest. But the MCL60, fastest car. They've definitely got something.
And as you said, like, I mean, drivers and teams, they're never going to say what their target is, are they? They're always very, very secretive. Like, we have our own internal targets. But if you're Lando, what are you thinking this year? Are you thinking, I can challenge Max? Are you thinking, I want to get higher than I did last year? Like, where do you think he should be aiming for as a driver?
Oh, I feel like, in terms of a driver right now, he needs to get that first win off the plate. As in, like, okay, I've got the win, and then whenever drivers get their first win, there's a switch. Something changes. And we've seen that so many times. When Rubens Barrichello got his first win at Ferrari, he immediately started to go, okay, I can do this. I've got that win. And you just start seeing a snowball effect, that there's that confidence. And even with Oscar Piastri getting that win, that sprint win in Qatar, that immediately was like, okay, I can kick on. Then he goes and gets more, the podium in Suzuka. It was fantastic. And you just feel like with Lando, if he gets that first win, that'll be a huge criticism that people, or question mark that people have on him. It's like, well, he still hasn't got the win yet, but McLaren can do it. And once he gets that, I feel like, okay, I've got the win. I now know what a win feels like. And then he can just start to be fighting for the top 4 drivers, as in potentially be the best of the rest. Or if Checo falls off, like he did in the middle part of 2023, go for third. Try and get that thing that Lewis Hamilton got in being the best of the rest. That's, I think, the ultimate goal. As in, being consistent, a couple of wins wouldn't hurt, and just enhancing what 2023, the second half of it, did.
Mm-hmm. And Dan, I'm going to give you a bit of a doozy. We're going to have the first listener question. And as I mentioned, teams are so secretive with their goals, but they're even more secretive with the contract lengths. We've got a question from Lewis Houghton. How long is Lando's new deal?
That was a question from Lewis Hamilton, was it?
No, Lewis Houghton. Yeah, I mean, he'd be interested as well. Similar name, not quite the same person.
How long is the deal? I mean, so as you say, they were quite vague. They call it a multi-year contract. I believe the wording that they used was, Lando will be racing for us in 2026 and beyond. So that stands to reason that it is at the very least the end of the 2027 season. At the very least, which makes it, I mean, we don't know quite how long Charles' contract is at Ferrari. There's a bit of secretive sort of nonsense behind that as well. I think a lot of the words, a lot of the rumours are maybe even 2029 on that contract. So you've got that. Charles at 29, Max's Red Bull contract is 2028. Lando, at the very least, has the third longest contract on the grid, and that is no bad place for McLaren to be in. That is a really, really strong bargaining position at the very least. Because let's be honest, if someone like Red Bull or Mercedes does come in and say, we want Lando, we want, whatever it takes, we've decided this is the guy that we want, McLaren can name their price, if they even have a price. They've got the ultimate bargaining position for the next at least 2, possibly 3 seasons, because they've just got such a long time left on that deal. And Lawrence sort of alluded to it there as well. It's a massive vote of confidence in McLaren from Lando, because that's been the one thing. His love for the team, that's never been in doubt at all. That's it. His passion. He wants to win with McLaren. The only question has been, can McLaren match his ambition with the car that they're able to build? And clearly he's happy with the progress that the team has made. And yeah, everything is looking really, really rosy for them.
And I'm going to ask you, you've asked, I'll start with you, Dan, first. Prediction for the season. Is Norris going to win a race? If you can, yes or no, I'm willing to accept caveats.
I really hope he does, more than anything. It's going to depend, I think, a lot, again, on how dominant Red Bull are, because, let's be honest, I think Norris was in a position to win a race last year in 2023. I think it is just the performance. I think gap doesn't even live up to it. It was a performance chasm between the RB19 and every other car on the grid. I think that was the only reason. I mean, Interlagos, as an example, absolute. You've got Max at the front running away with it. And then you've got Lando for most of the race, only a few seconds behind him. And everyone else is, 20 seconds, 30 seconds up the road. And Lando in an inferior car is able to, keep him honest at the very least. So you bring that performance gap closer together, which hopefully it will be this year, even just from a grid-wide perspective, a bit more competition, a bit more title or race win intrigue, if not title intrigue. Then I certainly think Lando is capable of it, and I do really hope so, because at the end of last year, a few mistakes in qualifying, you saw how much that sort of got to him a little bit. It was a bit sad to see him, I think, beating himself up a little bit too much. I think it is something that is really putting a lot of pressure on him now, so I really hope he does, just from that perspective, because I think Lawrence might be right. I think once the first one is down, once he's got that monkey off his back sort of thing, I think the floodgates could open in that respect.
And if we move on to someone who has sort of got that monkey off the bat, it's a sprint victory. We know it's not a proper victory, but of course, Oscar Piastri at least has crossed the line first in a Formula 1 event. Abby, if I come to you, obviously, I don't think anyone was expecting a year like that. Like, it was incredible. 9th in his rookie year. He obviously got that sprint win, as I mentioned, in Qatar. 2 podiums, 97 points. Like, an incredible rookie year. Like, where does he go from here? It's his difficult second album, I guess. Like, what's he got to achieve this year to see his progress?
Yeah, it is, because he had such a stellar rookie season in F1 with the sprint win, as you said. It's kind of raised expectations of him. I mean, he came into the sport with high expectations anyway, and he did prove them right, and he has proved what kind of driver he has been. But I think with McLaren's trajectory so far and the expectations that they now have coming into 2024 to perform, Lando potentially to get that win, improve on those little qualifying mistakes that Dan mentioned earlier, I think the pressure now is more on Oscar and whether he can kind of keep up with Lando, because I don't think one of them is completely on another level to the other, like Verstappen and Perez, one may say. But I think Oscar has to keep up. He has to keep performing and showing what he can do. I see podiums for him this year, potentially another sprint race win. Pushing it a bit, I think, with a Grand Prix win. But I think ultimately, it does depend on whether the gap between Red Bull is as huge as it was last year, but also whether Mercedes and Ferrari and Aston can be as competitive as they once were. Because as we saw last year, Aston went backwards and McLaren went forwards, which did help McLaren score a lot more points. But they all need to reach their goals over the winter, which they hopefully should know by now. And when we get into the first race, I think that needs to set the pace for Oscar and set his season. But I'm hopeful he can do well this season and hopefully score a lot more points.
Mm-hmm. And all right, so another listener question from Jack Saunders. What was it about Oscar that made McLaren go so aggressively for him from Alpine? Obviously, they sort of stole him under their nose. Like, bearing in mind he hadn't driven for a year, he had a year on the sidelines, and yet they were willing to pay, what was it, $17 million to politely say goodbye to Ricciardo just to get Piastri in. Like, what was it you think that really enticed them to go for it?
I think it's because Zach Brown is an incredibly shrewd manager. I have the personal theory that he has contracts by his bedside. He's constantly writing them. He has these vest pocket deals that you just feel, how on earth did he get that deal? Like, I wouldn't be surprised that this time next year we get a lot of hullabaloo about Oscar getting another contract extension like we did with Lando, if we get another season like this. But I feel like with Oscar is that he's so calm, and Mark Webber has taught him being Oscar Piastri's manager and mentor, some really remarkable things. And Mark Webber is a guy who knows how to deal with pressure, and he's been through all of that with Sebastian Vettel, just going like, not bad for a number 2 driver. He's just and multi-21. He's not afraid to call out a lot of if there's injustice. And obviously with the whole Alpine contract thing, he was just realizing, hey, you're using my guy as some kind of bargaining chip with Fernando. We're not having that. And then Zach comes in and say, I got you. And then I think Oscar said this in interviews that I've never felt this valued, and they love me and they want me. And then, as we've seen, I think I saw as early as Q2 in Jeddah, second race. He gets into Q3 and he gets P8. He gets 8th in his second qualifying in the tractor version of the MCL60, the MCL60 Fat. And just as in, like, it's the original. It's like with the original PS3. It got better over time, and then by the time you get to the end of the end of the PS3 thing, you get the really, really nice version, and that's what we got with the MCL60. But Oscar, it shows no fear. When we finally got a car in Silverstone, I remember as Lando took the lead, Oscar just went in on the inside trying to get Max. And it's like, you're doing that. You're going up against Max. And then as we saw in Spa in the sprint, Qatar in the sprint, he's not afraid. If he's got the car, he's not afraid to go after Max or give that a thing. And I think that's what Zach liked in him, is that after 2022 and Daniel Ricciardo was unceremoniously told, thanks, but no thanks, Lando probably felt absolutely invincible. Like, I've beaten this guy that Red Bull adored. And then in comes this kid. And I feel like a lot of people think that, Oscar's going to make Lando completely fall apart. I don't think so. This is the kind of motivation. And probably this is what Zach thought as well. This young gun, he could give Lando that kicking in the pants to really evolve and become Lando Prime, the peak of what we could see. And then they just both will motivate each other, and you'll have probably one of the most dynamic teams on the grid. And I'm not worried about team orders or then coming together, because McLaren have dealt with that so many times. Senna, Prost, Fernando and Lewis. They know how to immediately nip things in the bud and think, hey, team comes first. So I feel like Oscar's got this.
You lead me on perfectly to another listener question. I'll throw it to Dan. As Lando's been the better driver points-wise in Piastri in 2023, will the young Australian mount more of a competitive side this year? I mean, we've heard a lot about, and Lawrence touched on there, like, it's all well and good having two pretty much equal drivers, but everyone sort of assumes there's going to be some tension. Like, how do you see that playing out in 2024? Do you think it's going to be a case of, as we saw in 2023, Piastri was happy to sort of play second fiddle? Obviously, I'm thinking about the upgrades a lot here. He was more than happy to be the second guy to receive them. Do you think that's going to be different this year? Do you think he's going to sort of, I don't know, stick his elbows out a bit more and say, okay, I'm just as good as you are, mate?
I'm really glad you've asked me this question, because it's something that I wanted to talk about on this podcast. Because Oscar, you look at the numbers, Oscar versus Lando last year, and on paper it looks like Lando gave him a good hiding. And, he probably should. I mean, he's an experienced guy now. It was Oscar's rookie season. That should happen. But what you have to bear in mind is, obviously, McLaren, as we know, started the season really poorly, with a really attractor, McLaren Fat, or whatever we wanted to call it. I like that name, that was good. They started so badly, and then the first big upgrade comes in. Lando gets it first, Oscar gets it the following weekend. But even at that following weekend, yes, they've both got the upgraded car, but Lando's got the benefit of an extra race weekend's experience with that package. And it was the same for all the upgrades throughout the season. So Oscar spent more or less the entire season a step behind Lando in terms of the car that he got, whether it was having the old version of the car compared to Lando having the new, or even when he got that newer version of the car, Lando was ahead in terms of his experience with the car. So Oscar not only put in that incredible rookie season that he did, he also did it compared to Lando with sort of one arm tied behind his back a little bit. So that's what I really want to see from McLaren this year. I'd really love it if they're in a position to, I know it's difficult sometimes with cost cap and shipping and logistics and all the boring sort of aspects of it. But if they can be in a position where when they bring the upgrades, they give both the drivers them at the same time, give them both sort of an equal opportunity with them, I'd really love to see how Oscar gets on against Lando with that, because, you know, we all know he's got the talent. We know he's got the balls as well. You know, we talked about the way that he came into the sport on the back of that big controversy with Alpine. He was arguably the most under pressure rookie we've had in a long time, if not ever, in this sport, just because of the quite, again, I'm going to use the phrase ballsy way that he left Alpine and joined McLaren. So you can deal with all that side of it. There's no question of it. It'd just be really, really nice to see them both given an even sort of ground across the season. And I mean, we all know Lando's great, but I think Oscar can really hold his own, and I hope he proves me right this year.
Yeah, do you think that's something that Lando might be a bit worried about? I mean, he's been the young gun at McLaren for so long. He was sort of the up-and-coming guy, and now there's this other guy who's, I don't know, 2 or 3 years younger. Like you said, some people do sort of think he's got a higher ceiling. Do you think that's something that Lando's going to be like, right, this year I'm making sure he finishes well behind me?
He won't admit it, but I think so. I mean, he kind of already has admitted it indirectly a little bit in some of the things he's been saying about, again, after his contract, he did a press conference and he got asked about Oscar compared to Daniel. Is he giving you more of a push? And Lando's response was, he already is. He's already pushing me more than any other teammate he's had before. And he's aware of Oscar's ceiling, I think was the word that he used there. And he's aware of the talent that he's got, and he's aware, again, of the bravery that he's got. There's no fear in that little Australian lad whatsoever. And he's not scared of Lando, even though Lando, we know, is one of the most talented drivers on the grid, and Oscar's absolutely fine going toe-to-toe with him. So I think Lando is very aware of that. I don't think he'll be scared. I don't think he will, shy away from the challenge. The side effect that we might see is the side effect that we often see when we get 2 really great drivers in the same team going up against each other, and that there could be a bit of needle, a little bit of. But Zach has preempted that. He's already talked about that, and he's already kind of said that he expects that. If they get in a position where they can win races, there's only one guy that can win each race. So, there may well be some dissatisfaction between them at some point, but Zach's already said that he and Andrea feel like they're going to be able to more than deal with that when it arises. So obviously, hopefully from the McLaren perspective, they're correct on that front. Like Lauren said, they've got plenty of experience in that regard as well. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, but I think Lando is very aware that he's got a challenge on his hands in that team.
Just leading off what Dan said there, Abby, do you think for a top driver, do you think they want to have someone competing with them, or do you think they're a better driver when they've got a little bit of relative ease? I mean, looking over the last 10 or so years, like we've had Verstappen with Perez, who, as good as Perez is, hasn't put up much of a challenge to Verstappen. For the majority of Hamilton's time, it was Bottas who, again, wasn't really challenging him. Do you think the top drivers are able to be top drivers when they are competing in their own team, or do you think it's better to be a clear top dog?
I think as an F1 driver, you're always going to strive to be the best and always strive to be the fastest. I think Lewis said that as an explanation as to why he wants to stay in F1 at the moment, and renewed his contract with Mercedes for 2024, but has obviously changed, as we mentioned earlier. So I think having that teammate that can push you and can challenge you, it is a good thing, because one, it will help the team in the fact that you will both try and get the best points. Obviously, there are times when teammates have come together. We saw that with Russell and Hamilton recently, and that is not good for the team. But I think having a challenging teammate who will push you to be better, and like Dan said, with Lando and Oscar, Lando is aware of what Oscar can do. He is aware of the expectations on Oscar. And I think he will want to be better than that. And it is a good thing. I think having a teammate like Perez for Max, the car has been excellent. The RB19, we all know that. It was in another league, and I think that helped. But I feel like Max has a different mindset when it comes to the sport. in that he is more about himself sometimes than he is as a collective as Red Bull. So I think it depends on who the kind of driver is. But I would say it's always better to have a teammate who can challenge you, because it makes it more exciting at the end of the day.
And of course, moving away from the drivers a little bit, Lawrence, it's not just the drivers making an F1 team. There's hundreds of employees, and it's been quite a remarkable year for McLaren just as an organisation. I mean, for those who don't know, like going back to sort of, what was it, March last year, they took the decision to take James Key, who was their technical director, took his job and basically split it up, said, right, we're not having it one person do this anymore. We're going to hand it out to 3 people. And they've got some good hires. So they've got Rob Marshall from Red Bull, who was at Red Bull for 17 years, was crucial to them. And then now they've got David Sanchez as well from Ferrari. Like, how important do you think those staff hires are going to be? Maybe not for this season, because obviously the gardening leave has meant they've only just arrived, really. But looking into the future of McLaren, like, how important is getting the right people in going to be important for the team?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say I absolutely agree on Abby's point about, the drivers being, a key component of it and the team having that experience. So that's an excellent point, Abby, because that leads into the whole thing with the team element. Is that McLaren have it all together, and they have been developing this structure, because they used to have this kind of piecemeal three-person thing, and then it got removed and consolidated, but now they're going back to it again with Peter Prodromou. A long-term stay at McLaren, and then you get Rob Marshall, David Sanchez, and I believe I heard that they initially did their prognosis and they were saying they're on the right track, McLaren, as in they're getting everything sorted. And you feel like when McLaren were really close to bankruptcy in 2020, they were one of the most vulnerable teams after COVID. And they had to do a massive restructuring to get everything back in tip-top shape. And I feel like they've come out of it stronger. They've made things much leaner. They've fully embraced the cost cap and have come up with an efficient way of building the car. As in, they said, we're not going to be doing big B-spec upgrades. We're going to do piecemeal upgrades over the course of the season. We got the first in Baku, then Spielberg, we got that, Silverstone. It was gradual upgrades, which eventually, Silverstone, it all came together and gave us the rocket ship. And a really great place for it to happen. Silverstone, with the classic chrome accents, it was brilliant. A brilliant signalling that McLaren had got it back together. And that entire team has been through the ringers for about nearly a decade. The culture of McLaren has completely changed. It's gone from the Ron Dennis era of everything has to be grey. Everything has to be grey. You can't have music on. You have to pack everything away at night, even if you're going to be pulling an all-nighter. No, it's a lot more relaxed. And I think people didn't really see that with Zach Brown at the beginning. It's just the thinking, well, what's he going to bring? But he's brought that fun aspect of McLaren from back in the 70s, the James Hunt era. Maybe not quite as, risque, but just fun. As in, yeah, but you just feel like with Oscar and Lando's cheeky chappy, and he's got the youth vote, as in the younger Formula One fans adore him, and then Oscar comes in and he's just like completely unflappable, and it's just like you get this guy that he goes toe to toe with Lewis Hamilton twice, and he just goes, "Oh no, my car's broken. Well, that was annoying. Oh well," and then goes on to get some points anyway. It's just feel like that's brilliant. Just that morale. They've got such a good morale right now with 2 drivers who are for the team, and all of the staff there just seem happy. It just seems a good atmosphere, and a good atmosphere is most important. They've got the tools, they've got the drivers, they've got the staff, they've got people from Red Bull and Ferrari, and in some cases people coming back. They just feel like everything's coming together. They've got the wind tunnel, which has been the longest sticking point. They say, don't you worry, folks. We're going to get our wind tunnel. We're going to get that wind tunnel. Everything's going to be great. And then it never happened. And then we got it now. And you feel like, okay, good. Let's see what we can do. It's just the mindset's just there. As I said earlier, they're punchy. And I like that.
I'm great that you brought the wind tunnel. That was going to be my next question. I'll go to you, Dan. Like, can you just sort of explain what the benefits of having a wind tunnel in your own base is? Like, I mean, it sounds obvious, but obviously McLaren have been getting by since 2010, going off to Cologne, using Toyotas. But like Lawrence said, now they've got it in their own base. Like, what is that going to do for the team?
Well, it's massive, like you say, that, when you're using someone else's facility, first of all, you've got all the travel all the time, which is not ideal, it's a time waste, it's a cost waste, it's pointless on that front. And then you've got to liaise with Toyota when they're not using it for their own Gazoo racing activities, and you've got to have all that side of it. And then when you finally get there, you're using someone else's facilities, you may not necessarily be, they use them for a while, so you'd hope they'd be used to using it for a while. But you've just got all of that nonsense, all of that noise that's, potentially getting in the way, being a bit of a barrier, and that is all immediately gone because you're in the MCL, you're in Woking, you're in the MCL, in the MTC, sorry. And, you go to the wind tunnel, and instead of getting on a flight to Cologne, you pop downstairs, and there you go, it's so much easier. And that just cannot be underestimated, the value of just having that so much more accessible. You can use it whenever you want, obviously within the wind tunnel restriction time that every team has to adhere to. But it's massively important. Obviously, the fact that it's a newer facility, it'll have more bells and whistles and more fun little toys that all the very smart brainiacs that are in the car design department can use as well. So the fact that it's a new facility, obviously it's the newest facility on the grid now because they've just built it. So that obviously helps as well, but yeah, for every single aspect, from even just, like I say, less of a waste of time and resource on that front, it's massively important. Even boosting staff morale. Oh, I've got to get on a plane to Germany again, spend another 4 days away from my family, and it's things like that. Even that side of it, massively important. I don't think it can be overestimated.
And Abby, just going back to those staff hires, like, we often talk about bragging rights in sport and like signal of intent, but I think over the last few years or so, it's been such a mad time for staff moves. Like, we've had people pretty much swapping teams every other month, it seems. But if you look at McLaren, they've managed to get two pretty senior guys from their main rivals, and there doesn't seem to be a huge amount going out the other way. Obviously, Andre Seidel went to Sauber/Audi, like that made sense. But other than that, they've managed to keep a lot of their staff in base. Like, how do you think they managed to do that? Like, what is it that's made so many people, using the example of Rob Marshall, like, why has he left someone like Red Bull, where he's just winning after race, to go to a McLaren? Like, what do you think Zach Brown would have told him?
Well, if you would have asked me last year, at the beginning of last year, I would have said the team that could have made the most improvements and become a championship winning team would have been Aston Martin, because Lawrence Stroll kept going on about this 5-year project that Aston Martin had and all these developments they were making. And I thought, great, I can't wait to see you do that. 2023 started off for a great season. Obviously, it went downhill, and I was like, okay, maybe not. McLaren come in, they turn it around immensely. They've secured both drivers, as the guys have said. They've got all these new hires. They've got the new wind tunnel. And it feels like they're just such a good team in atmosphere, in personnel. And I feel like it's a real community, or not to be cliche, but like a family. Because F1, yes, it's a driver, but it's not just a driver's sport. There are so many different elements that go into it. And McLaren have always been the ones more active on social media, more active with fans, trying to appeal to the younger audience. And having that family-like feel can be very advantageous and very enticing to some people. Like, I don't really see that with Red Bull. I know there's the Red Bull family, and then you have AlphaTauri or Visa Cash App RB, VCarb RB, whatever you're calling that team. But for McLaren, I think it is a place people want to work because they always seem jovial and happy. And for the likes of Rob Marshall, David Sanchez and that, it's going to provide them a new challenge, because McLaren have been on the back foot for a few years, but now they're slowly making their way to the front. They've beat Alpine, they beat Aston Martin next year. Will they beat Mercedes or Ferrari this year? Depending on how those two teams do. I think it's just an exciting new challenge and a great place to feel welcome and to work, because I never hear any complaints about McLaren, really.
And Lawrence, one last question about McLaren that we sort of move around the paddock. And it's, I must admit, it's not as serious as the other ones we've just been talking about. Obviously, liveries, hugely important to the fan. Like, everyone loves them. Teams probably not that fussed. Like, it's a place to get their sponsors. But we've had a question from Stuart White saying, will McLaren be using the light blue and orange Golf livery? And I've got bad news, I'm afraid, Stuart, that unfortunately that contract's ended. They moved over to Williams last year. And I don't know about you guys, but Williams have not made the most of that in my mind. But going back to McLaren,
I disagree. Very strongly disagree. I thought the Williams special liveries last year, I thought they were great. I thought they looked fantastic. Those Williams cars.
I love those McLaren Monaco ones. Maybe they stuck with me. But I wanted to ask you, Lawrence, like, how many liveries do you think we're going to see from McLaren this year? Because they absolutely love a special livery. I've lost track of how many we had last year. Like, are we going to have another year like that where it's just every other week there's a new one?
Well, I will say that I think Golf have actually addressed this when they released the FW45 and we were like, hey, where's the Golf? We were promised the Golf. Where's the Golf? And then they said, hey, whoa, this is a brand new long-term deal. We don't want to throw all our eggs in one basket just yet. Give it some time. So we might see more integration going forward. But with McLaren, I think Zach is just like, he's like, yeah, I like that livery. Put it on the car. And well, I think one livery they missed out on was the original white and green livery, the original Bruce McLaren. Mm-hmm. They missed that one. It's a shame they didn't do that. But I feel like we'll probably see the chrome livery, the chrome accents again at Silverstone because it went down so well. So we'll see it probably for the home race. We might maybe see a monster special. Ooh, you might see like a proper lime green, orange, and black because they showed their race suits and their helmet designs with their Toyota Special Rio Horikawa with his absolutely wholesome design. I think his daughter helped design the helmet, which was really sweet. But you had the monster implementation on it, and that was really cool. And then this shot of Oscar with the monster logo on the collar that we're so used to with the Mercedes. And I'm sorry, the McLaren race suit, as was pointed out by many people on the internet, made it look like an orange highlighter pen, as in it's orange and a little tip. But hopefully McLaren will be the highlight of the year.
There you go.
But
yeah, that was planned.
We'll probably, literally as we were talking. So it was just like, I need to use that. But I think we'll definitely we'll have the standard, so counts as one. We'll have one for Silverstone. We'll definitely have one for Vegas. And hopefully it's something a bit more zingy than the Jack Daniels one. The Jack Daniels one was okay. We might get one for a night race, the stealth mode again, but then it's already kind of stealthy because they did say that the NCL38's livery is going to be a mixture of the stealth livery and the Triple Crown livery, which is a good one. That was a really good underrated one. It's just a shame. We probably won't see the Triple Crown one as much because it was at the time when they weren't doing so well, when they were a bit slower. And it was signaled to the point when Lando got third place at the Spanish Grand Prix qualifying, and then Max is coming out and he's looking at what are they doing there? How did Lando get there? And he I think he was just looking for how did you do that? And but yeah, I feel like we'll get at least 3.
I must admit that Triple Crown livery is by far my favourite. I
so
absolutely
underrated.
loved that.
So
yeah,
underrated.
It was so good. I wish they could race on that every week, but alas, sponsors say no. So right, I'm gonna put you all on the spot one final time. I want a prediction of where McLaren are going to finish in the constructors. So I'm going to go in reverse order. I'll start Lawrence. Start with you. Give me the number.
I would say P3.
Abby.
I was going to say P3 as well.
Oh, wow, is it going to be a clean suit, Dan? You go P3.
I was going to say P3, but I don't want to be boring. So, problem is,
I'm not going to. I'm not going to say P3, so you've got free reign to say something different.
I think P4 is more likely than P2. No, just than P2. Okay. I was going to say P3, but I don't want to be dull, and I want to be that guy. So I will say P4, and McLaren fans can at me on Twitter if they would like.
That will be in the link in the description if you want to at him.
Yeah.
For that opinion.
You can save yourself by saying there'll be like a 15-point split between second, third, and fourth. It'll be a close fourth.
That's it. I really do think it will be. I think it's hard to say without seeing cars on track, but it's hard to imagine anyone. They'll probably be closer to Red Bull, but you imagine probably very comfortable winners again. And then behind them, it really is anyone's game. So P2 is a possibility. I'm very open to that. And from the British perspective, we've got a British brand, a British driver. Yeah, why not?
I'm actually going to go P2. I mean, as you said, they've got so much going for them. They've got the wind tunnel, they've got the new staff, they've got the drivers. I'm looking around the other teams, and I can think you can probably spot a problem with each of the other teams, like the Astons and the Ferraris of the world. So yeah, why not P2? And someone can clip this in a year's time and send it to me when they finish fifth. So moving on.
All of a sudden, I'm feeling good with my P4 prediction.
Moving on swiftly. It's come to the portion I called around the paddock. And now initially, this was just going to be a light bit at the end, thinking, oh, what's happened in the paddock? Beforehand, I had written, is Visa Cash App RB the worst name ever? But obviously, that has been struck off. There's much far more important things to speak of. We will start with the ex-McLaren man himself, Lewis Hamilton, moving sensationally to Ferrari. It went from rumour to confirmed in the space of about 12 hours. It was a mad day. Let's sort of keep it through the McLaren lens, but how do you think that's going to go? Is Hamilton going to be? I'll go to you, Abby. So probably should have specified who I was asking this question to. Is Hamilton going to be up there again? Is he going to be challenging? Is it going to be him and McLaren next year? Him and Red Bull? Like, how do you see that going?
Well, when Hamilton left McLaren and went to Mercedes, a lot of people were like, what is he doing that for? Why have you left McLaren, a team where you're comfortable, you've excelled in that? And the same has happened again this year. But I think, to me, I feel like Ferrari are a jigsaw puzzle that have all the right pieces, but in the completely wrong order. And I feel like Hamilton can come into that team and take all of his experience and help Ferrari build up from the bottom and put all the pieces in the right order and complete that jigsaw puzzle. And I think he will excel. I don't think he'll get his 8th championship title next year in 2025, but I'm not saying that he can't with Ferrari. I do think McLaren will be up there fighting. And with Hamilton at Ferrari, I can see Ferrari taking a step up. And I cannot wait to see Hamilton in red battling Lando and Oscar in Papaya. I just think that's going to be so exciting to see him actually be able to battle, because Mercedes haven't done very well in the past couple of seasons since the new regulations. We all know that. They've struggled. And I think that is part of his reasoning behind leaving Mercedes, because they just haven't been able to provide him with that car. And I think on McLaren's trajectory, they are soon going to get that race-winning are, and in the few years to come, the championship-winning car. So I think it's going to be a great battle for all F1 fans to watch.
And Lawrence, are you in a similar school of thought? I mean, personally, I think it could go one of two ways. Like we go, like Abby saying, go quite well, or we could have Plan E question and Lewis throwing his steering wheel out of the car every weekend. Like, how do you foresee his move over to Ferrari?
Well, as Abby pointed out, it was true. This is exactly the same thing that happened with McLaren. Yeah, when he left McLaren, it was just such a bombshell, because he and McLaren had been together for such a long time. Why would he suddenly go? And he'd been saying that he wanted to be at McLaren for life, like how he said he wanted to be at Mercedes until the end of his career. But then clearly something changed. And I imagine this is a clear sign to say to people, hey, Fred Vasseur, you don't mess with that guy. He's a sleeper hit. And it's all telling, because on his door, it does not say the president or the CEO. It says Fred on it. That's the kind of guy he is, straight talking. And Lewis would understand the score, because he's been working with Fred. He worked with Fred in 2005 and then 2006. And they were really close and get together with the opportunity. And I think Fred's just gone, hey, I've now got the money of Ferrari. Why don't I just get Mr. Elkan on the blower and just say to Lewis, hey, how down are you to actually finish your career with Ferrari? And they start off casually, they get the ball rolling. And then from what we've heard is that it was just Mercedes fumbling the ball in terms of the long-term pitch for Lewis, who reportedly wanted a 3-year deal. And they weren't prepared to give it to him with a 1+1 sort of deal. And it was just not quite what Lewis had in mind. And it was just, you just feel like Ferrari wanted him more and really wanted him. And as we said with Oscar, when a team really wants you, that is such a confidence booster. And it's like, these guys value me. And Ferrari, this storied company and team, it's like with Sebastian Vettel's classic thing. Everyone's a Ferrari fan. Even if they say they're not, they are. Lewis has Ferraris in his collection. And it's like, of course, he said many times that I'd love to have a portion of my career at Ferrari. And he's gone ahead and done it. And I just feel like it could be a good relationship. I bet it's going to be one of those situations where it's like, hey, if I don't get the title, it's all good. If I can at least just have a couple of wins in red, if I can win Monza with Ferrari, that'd be fantastic. Just to make up for, all the years that I've prevented Ferrari drivers from winning. Now I can be with them. And then it's a part of F1 history. And it came at the right time, the story, as in F1 2023, everyone's like, oh, fatigued about Red Bull. Oh, please somebody do it. And then Lewis comes in with this absolute left field move and goes like, oh, everyone's energized F1 again. People want to see it. Because Lewis Hamilton, he's not just an F1 driver. He is a worldwide brand. He is a worldwide statement. Whatever Lewis does, it makes news. Because when all the news was breaking, I had to take my pets to the vet and it was just developing. And on the radio, they were mentioning this deal. It was making... The normies were paying attention to this. All the journalists were going like, this is big. This is huge. And this has just made Formula One extremely relevant at this point in time. It's going to cause waves. And I just think he'll be just doing this as hey, this is just a nice, relaxed way to finish off my career, man. Just, let's have fun.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like you said, it was news that just spread everywhere. Dan, coming to you, obviously, there's two drivers in the team. Is this good for Leclerc? Is this bad for Leclerc? How do you see that team partnership working out?
Good, bad. I think they're far too definitive terms in terms of this because, first of all, I don't imagine for a second that Lewis Hamilton is going to go to Ferrari and happen to be happy to be second driver. Of course he's not. Is this Lewis Hamilton? He's not going to go there and go, oh yeah, Charlie, you've been here for 5-6 years, whatever it is, and you're here for another 5 more with your new contract. You're the main guy. I'm 40 now. I'll just drive around for a bit. It's nice and fun. I'm wearing red. Hey, that's not why he's here. This is Lewis Hamilton. He's going to Ferrari because he thinks that Ferrari are going to give him a better opportunity to win the championship than Mercedes will before he has to retire. He's going to be 40 by the time he makes that move. Leclerc is, as much as Ferrari try and pretend that Carlos and Charles get the same treatment, we all know, the contracts itself, it proves Leclerc is the guy that they're building the future around, and Carlos is the unfortunate collateral damage of this massive Lewis Hamilton move. I really don't know how Ferrari are going to approach that driver lineup because you've got 2 proper alphas in that team now. Charles has been the cornerstone for years, so again, he's not going to be backing down. He doesn't care that it's Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, 103 race wins coming in. He's not going to back down either. He's going to expect to still be, the guy that the team is building the future around on the track. And like I said, Lewis is going to go in expecting to be the alpha, the main man. So, it's got the potential to be a really, really good partnership, but it's also got the potential to be really fiery, I think, at that team. And Ferrari haven't always dealt with internal conflicts all that well before. So, their internal communication is, it gets a lot of stick even today. So, I think it's got the potential to be absolutely blockbuster, and I cannot wait.
That's what we want to hear after such a disappointing year. What a perfect way to end it. I want to say thanks to all 3 of you coming on the first episode, Pondering Papaya podcast. It's out of the garage. It's over the start line, and hopefully it's going to be a good year for McLaren, but also a good year for F1. So again, my thanks to all 3 of you, and that will do us. So that's it for today's Pondering Papaya podcast. My thanks to Dan, Lawrence and Abby for joining me, and a thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch with the show, email inbox@ponderingpapaya.com or reach out on our socials @ponderingpapaya. You can also make sure you hear every episode by subscribing on Spotify or Apple, and we will see you next week for reacting to McLaren's car launch.